So I will be taking 3 questions at a time. Here, in the middle.
شكرا جزيلا. اسمحوا لي أن أبدي إعجابي بالسيد جنجيز على ما يحمل من فكر النير. أشد على يديك أطال الله بعمرك. السؤال هو في عام 1915 الإمبراطورية العثمانية قتلت من الأرمن كلدان سريان آشوريين قرابة 3 ملايين، وهؤلاء الناس هم أصل المنطقة، وكانت ماردين أكبر مدينة يقطنها السريان. اليوم توزعوا في الشرق ويقطنون في أستراليا، أمريكا، أوروبا، ولا يزال عينهم على أرضهم، على أرض أجدادهم. أوكي. السؤال هو: ألم يحن الوقت تركيا تعترف بمذابح الأرمن وتعيد أرضهم إلى أصحابهم؟ شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you. Over there? Yeah, please.
لەم پانێڵە بینیم سێشت باس کرا. یەکەم دەربارەی دەوری سعودیە و مسر وەکو دەوڵەتی سونی کە لە ناوچەکە دەورە گێڕن، پاشان ناتۆ و تورکیا، دوایی مساڵحەی کورد و تورکیا، لەگەڵەوەی کە ئەمریکا خێرایە لە چارەسەری مشکلەکان و خێرا دێتە جواب. من یەکەم شت دەڵێم بەنسبەت بە تایبەتی سعودیەوە. سعودیە لە کاتێکە بەشدارە لە لێدانی داعش لەو تەحالوفەی کە هەیە، کەچی ئێمە ئەبین لێ عەلامە و بیستین لەو یارمەتیانی کە بۆ داعش ئەڕوا لە کارتۆنی یارمەتیەکانە نووسراوە المملكة العربية السعودية لنا قوسيا كنسرا المملكة الإنسانية لكاتيكا ئافرەتی کورد فەساد دەکرێ، کچی کورد ئەڕفێنرێ و ساحەی کوردستانیش بۆتە شوێنی شەڕێکی گەورە. خاڵی دووەم خێرا من بە خێرایی ئەڵێم ئەبینم ینی دەوری ناتۆ لە وەڵامدانەوەی تورکیا هەرچەندە ئەو ئەندام و پێکەوە لەوە ئەکرێ بڵێن لاوازە. ڕۆژانە کورد لە حدود لای کۆبانی ئەبینین کوردە کوژرێ لە ناو سیارەکەی خۆی غازی بەسەرا ئەکرێ، بریندارە بینێ خوێنەکەی ئەڕێژێ بەسەر عەردا نایبن بۆ خەستەخانەکانی یا تاخیریانەکە ئەمرێیانی. خاڵێکی تر من ئەبینم جدیت نییە لە مساڵحەی لەو ئەکرێ بڵێن گفتوگۆی مفاوزاتەی لەبین کورد و تورکیا بە تایبەتی لەلایەن کێوە؟ لەلایەن تورکیاوە. کورد بە جدیەتی زۆر بەڵام تورکیا وانە. ئەگەر وایە ڕاستە چۆن ئەکرێ لەگەڵ یەکێکە گفتوگۆ بکەی لە سجن زیندانە و بەندکراوە؟ ماناوایە و کەسە ئازاد نییە، سەربەز نییە. خاڵێکی تر لە کۆتاییە دیسان دێمەوە سەر ئەمریکا ئەبینم جاد نییە وەکو ئەو برادر لە پانێڵی یەکەماوتی بەنسبەت یەکلایکردنەوەی داعش. ئەگەر خێرا ئەوێ داعش لە ناوبەرێ ئەوە ئەمە ئەبین 4 مانگە لە کوردستان بۆتە ساحەیەکی شەڕێکی تەواو لە کۆبانی تا کۆباشی، کەچی لە ماوەی 2 هەفتەیە لە شەڕی کەندا و سەدامی لە ناوبردیانی. خاڵێکی تر کە ئەمە جێگەی نیگەرانیە بۆ من، بۆ هەموو کورد، بۆ هەموو کوردستان، بە هەموو کورد لە دنیاە، ئەمریکا ئەوروپا فشار خاتە سەر کورد بۆی بگەڕێتەوە بۆ بەغدا. بەغدایەک کە موچە بودجە ڕزقی لە کورد بڕیوە و ئەمەوێ وەڵامی ئەو برادرانە چۆن بێ لەمە و سوپاس.
Okay. Can you please go on the back? On the back. There. There's a lady over there on the back. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. My name is Perihan Kitania Krawi, and I'm from the RTG group. I have a question, especially that goes to Mr. Candar and to Mr. Candar and Professor Saban. So far, to me, it looks like that the so far it looks to me like the peace process in Turkey, and especially the dialogue, has been conducted by the government with the Kurdish actors and population. And I have a question: is it can it be that the ethnic Turks feel or have been excluded from that process? And particularly what is being done to address the fears and the lack of understanding of the importance of solving the Kurdish question with the Turkish society in general, in order of maybe also changing the public opinion, which is important at the end for the foreign policy of Turkey. Thank you.
Would you like, please, to respond?
Kimin? Türkleri.
Mr. Candar, would you like to respond?
Yes, the second one, there was no question, I think. So the first question about the Armenian genocide issue, which the next year, 2015, will be the 100th anniversary of it. It will be a very big headache for Turkey's image and in terms of Turkish foreign policy. It is a well-known and well-understood fact by different segments of the society and also by the leaders of Turkey to deal with. But if the question is whether Turkey's decision makers, the current decision makers, namely, actually there is only one decision maker in Turkey, his name is Tayyip Erdogan. And if you want another one because of his title, you have to put a comma, not a point, but put a comma. Then you can also say Mr. Davutoglu because he's the prime minister, but it is basically Mr. Erdogan at the moment is the main policy maker. So in terms of him, or if you put a number of others even, if you would be speaking of Turkish leadership, whether they will or he will recognize that it was a genocide which was committed 100 years ago, the simple question will be no. Whether there will be a new voice that would come out from Turkey's policymakers, Turkey's leaders, different than what we heard before on this issue, yes. As in the 99th anniversary of the Armenian genocide issue, April this year, 2014, Mr. Erdogan issued a statement which was very new in terms of wording and so on, and so he wanted to share the agonies of the Armenians. So even this wording became a matter of excitement for many people in Turkey and outside as a new voice, but it didn't come to the point of a recognition that it was a genocide. And there shouldn't be any expectations that it will be in the coming year, in 2015, not because they are not ready to absorb this historical issue as a fact of a genocide, but more than that, this very government and the very policy maker, Mr. Erdogan himself, has become tilting to more nationalistic and xenophobic positions than before. If you follow Turkish policies and the Turkish political stage very closely, in the last 2-3 months particularly, when you hear Mr. Erdogan speaking, and he speaks 3 times a day in average, sometimes and most of the times, his discourse has become very nationalistic and anti-Western and a bit xenophobic. So from this amalgamation, it doesn't come out of a recognition, particularly at the election year in Turkey, 2015, that it was a genocide. Not only, of course, that they don't believe that it was a genocide. So it's also a matter of ideological position. So this is about that issue. Coming to Ms. Perihan's question on the perception of the reconciliation process in Turkey. First, I should make very clear that I don't believe that there is a reconciliation process in Turkey. To be called as a reconciliation process, because there is no process. It is at standstill, it's not moving, it's immobile. So when we speak of a process, we need certain elements to make it or to define it as a process. One is it has to have a roadmap. More importantly, or equally important, it has to have a timetable. You have to know which stations you will be heading, which stations that you will be stopping to move to another station from there. In such imperatives which makes a process, we don't know it. There is a talk that a roadmap will be explained, announced, that they are talking about a timetable or not, but it's just rumors, mainly leaked to the press by pro-government journalists, which puts them forward, when there is tension on the Kurdish issue. This comes up since 2 years that roadmap is coming. It will be announced and so on and so forth. So until now, we don't know whether there is a roadmap or a timetable. And if we don't know as a public, even if there is, it means there is not, because there is no public scrutiny on the process. What we are having actually, which is a very positive and a good thing, is a state of cessation of hostilities. It's a enhanced, if I should call it as such, an enhanced ceasefire, which is very conducive for any reconciliation, for any resolution, for any peace to be achieved, which is good. There are no violence, people are not getting killed, no military personnel on the Turkish side, no Kurdish fighters of the PKK, so it's good. But this is not a reconciliation process. This is a management of the issue, which has been done successfully until now from the government side. As much there was no violence, we did have 2 consecutive elections, 1 local elections, 1 presidential elections, and we will be having the parliamentary elections next year. So in a non-violent atmosphere, which is very important for the elections, the management of the whole issue under the title of a reconciliation process is a success on the part of the government. But it cannot be replaced by a real, genuine reconciliation process, which we really need. That we need, but whether we are having it or not, it's a matter of a debate. What I believe, it is not that what we are having. That's why the Kurdish issue and the climate pertinent to Kurdish issue is very fragile still in Turkey.
The other speakers to respond to any of the questions if they would like. Would you like to respond to any?
Maybe briefly about the first question. I mean, 3 million, the numbers are not correct. This is a disputed issue. This is not an ideological difference between the Turkish government and the rest of the world, or at least some countries. It is also a historical dispute. There is no established fact about Armenian genocide, and you cannot just ask it to recognize or not. About Mr. Erdogan's statement, actually it was not new. The foreign minister Davutoğlu at the time had developed two concepts. In the Turkish Policy Quarterly, you would recall he published a piece recently, right before that. There are two critical concepts there: the common pain, shared memory, to reconcile with the Armenian issue. So these concepts that underpin Erdogan's statement have been around for some time. The Foreign Minister Davutoğlu at that time was building on that. And then it is based on an understanding that the events of 1915 have to be put into a broader context. It's not just the Armenians that did suffer. The Kurds, the Turks, Azeris, they all suffered in the hands of each other to some extent. Probably more Armenians died in the hands of Kurds than the Turks at the time. So it's not just the Ottoman army killed the Armenians. So we have to be just and fair when we do talk about history. About the resolution process, I agree with Cengiz Bey. It is not reconciliation, but I don't think there is no process is the right way to describe it. There is a process. It is, in my eyes, initial sort of confidence building phase, maybe not deliberately so, but it does serve that purpose, as you emphasized. I mean, when we look at the events of 7 October this year, the reaction coming from Abdullah Öcalan and other Kurdish actors and the people on the ground, they are, to me, conveying the message that there is some minimum trust that's there, confidence that's there to move forward. So in that sense, it is a good basis. So about the roadmap, I don't know the details, of course, we don't know, but probably it's going to be based on the negotiations between the government and Öcalan and the HDP, other Kurdish actors. But the fact that there are no clearly announced roadmap could also be part of the negotiating strategy. So here the issue of timing, at what stage, what to give, what not to give. So these are all parts of the ongoing strategy, but I don't think there is no process. And also about the timetables, actually there was a timetable about the withdrawal of PKK militants from Turkey, which was not observed. So there are certain timetables on different issues, but the critical question is what Abdullah Öcalan has also been arguing, moving from talking to negotiating. That stage, that threshold hasn't been passed. Probably this is what we are going to observe in the coming days, weeks, months, even years. We don't know how long it will take, but there is a process. So this is not a simple issue that you can solve overnight. And then the lack of information is, of course, in the nature of such processes, you cannot just announce. So it will take two to tango. I think there is some confidence. But about the rest of Turkey, how it is explained, to a certain extent, the rest of Turkey is in the dark. They don't know much, which is understandable given the nature of the challenge, which can be criticized from a democratic point of view. But at the end of the day, I think personally the government has to do something to explain what it takes. At one point, when certain extended rights are given to the Kurds. But the way the government so far has proceeded, to me, shows that there won't be any special status or any privileges designed for the Kurds only. It will be part of the broader decentralization and democratization of Turkish state. If they can do it, I don't know. But this will be the way to go. There was a question about how can Turkey talk to Öcalan while he's in prison. I guess he's getting a good treatment in the prison. And the very fact that Turkey does talk to Öcalan comes with certain risks and costs. It was based on certain assumptions that in the process, the PKK will also normalize, meaning will be a legitimate partner that is civil, democratic, and acts in the political realm, not keeping the arms, using the force of arms to influence local politics. This is the problem now. This is the spoiler in the process, that the PKK refuses to normalize, move from the gray area where the government is talking to PKK as a terrorist organization, taking the risk, into being a normal political actor. This is the challenge. This is the risk. This is, I think, the main obstacle. But another important threshold that has been passed, there was a legislation this summer that was passed from the parliament. That's important. Now that legislation gives sort of authority and power to the government to negotiate. The negotiations were also in the gray area. You never know if 2 terms later there is another party that comes to power, Nationalist Action Party, and tries the officials that were involved in the negotiations with Abdullah Öcalan. Now we have a legal framework to move forward with the negotiations. So I think so far we are not close to any roadmap, clear roadmap, but I don't think we didn't go through a process. The process is in that sense important, especially in the way forward. The government will also have to work more focusedly on talking to the rest of the country, explaining what it will take. So they tried other initiatives such as like the Wise Man or other stuff that did serve some purpose, that are criticized. Now they are trying to revive that process. There are certain trial and errors, but the process is in the early phases. I think there is some initial good basis, confidence to move forward.
Mr. Werz, would you like to make a comment, or?
Just with regard to the notion that the United States is not serious in Syria, I think one should be very careful with that assessment. And my colleague Max Hoffman has spoken very eloquently about the fact that the military mission in Syria is a political mission. It is not only military, it's political in the sense that it is very targeted, very precise, and not preparing US ground forces to move in, but it is in support of certain actors that have the capacity to change the region. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind. The decision to start the mission against ISIS has not been easy for the president, for domestic reasons, because it's very costly. People in the United States are very tired of the military engagement in the Middle East, and it was a bold decision. Some of us would have liked to see the president move earlier and more consistent on Syria, but to question the seriousness of the current undertaking, I think is unfair and also politically not accurate. I think with regard to the peace process, there is one important nexus between what is happening in northern Syria and that new emerging pragmatic partnership between the United States and Kurdish groups and the peace process in Turkey. The perspective from the US is that the US government has gone out of its way to protect Kobani. The mission is very expensive. It has political costs domestically, but also with regard to the US-Turkish relationship. So the expectation is that the Kurdish groups that are interested in entering a conversation about the future of the region also continue their activities with regard to deepening democracy, allowing Kurdish groups that are not of the governing parties participation in power. And I think with regard to the domestic situation in Turkey, it is absolutely necessary that the PKK begins to broaden the nascent discussion about massive mistakes that have been made by the PKK in the past. That is not a discussion that is important because the Turkish government on the other side then should admit that it has done wrong. It is important for the Kurdish movement, for the internal conversation, and also to make sure that this discussion is broad and international, because that will help to elevate the level of awareness about Kurdish issues in international conversations in Europe and in the United States. But it is, I think, a very important requirement to make the next step.
Hopefully, this panel is a starting point for further discussion on Turkey's neighborhood policies in KRG. Unfortunately, we don't have more time. I have to end it here. Thank you very much for your contributions, and thank you for your attendance.